Welcome to Monster Men.
We are excited to have a three-time offender who is an author, a podcaster, a filmmaker, and a freaking rock star. It's our man Lyle Blackburn. How you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. Thanks.
We don't have many people on this show that have all those under their belt, especially the rock star part.
Right. Yeah, it's hard to attain, but I guess to some degree, I have.
Yeah. I mean, we had Eric Mintel. I don't know if you've ever met him with Eric Mintel Investigates. He's a paranormal researcher. So he was a jazz musician,
Okay.
but I'm a metalhead, so I'm all about the rock stars.
He was interesting because he would investigate theaters that he had played concerts in. So it was pretty
Yeah,
funny.
that's pretty cool.
It's a good way
Yeah.
to gather research.
Yeah, that kind of links up. I guess I would have to stop in the middle of traveling between tour dates in the middle of the nowhere part and then run out in the woods while my band members like waited and then come back and drive on to the city.
Yeah, you don't get a lot of cryptids in movie theaters and and nightclubs and
Yeah,
stuff.
gotta go ghost for that.
Yeah.
Well, what are we talking about today?
Well, Lyle's new book, The Lake Worth Monster, just came out. What was it? 3 weeks ago? Am I close?
I think yes. It's been
Yeah.
a bit of a blur, but yeah, around first week of September sometime.
I picked it up immediately the first day it was on sale and devoured it because I love your stuff. I have all your books, and I'm as fascinated with cryptids, and specifically your specialty is bipedals, I would think, to say the least. But also, they have kind of the richest history. So, why don't you tell us what is the Lake Worth monster?
Well, Lake Worth Monster is sort of another case ripped from the headlines, if you will, like several of my other books. And this one occurred starting on July 10th, 1969, very close to where I live because Lake Worth is just north of Fort Worth, Texas, and I was born in Fort Worth. And on that evening, several couples were parked out at Lake Worth in an area known as Greer Island. And this was sort of a lover's lane hangout back then, dirt roads, and people went there to hang out and, drink and party and do lover's lane stuff and even fish. And so there was some couples out there, and this guy named John Reichert took his wife out there, and he wanted to fish. So it was after dark, and he was all about the fishing. She thought it was really spooky, so she stayed up in the car. And he was down there fishing, and all of a sudden he hears his wife scream, turns around, and sees this white sort of figure that jumped on the hood of the car and then sort of was near the passenger side window where she was. So he threw the rod down and ran back up there, and he tussled with what he described as a upright, hair covered goat man animal thing. And he tussled with this for moments and just jumped in the car and they drove off. And the thing apparently scratched the side of their car as they drove off. Well, they drove to a cafe up on Jacksboro Highway and went in and borrowed the phone to call the police. The police respond, and of course, you tell them, a monster attacked you. They're a bit dubious, but
Yeah.
the police had actually gotten several calls for the last few months saying people had seen something monstrous or something around the lake, and so they were listening. And then so a couple of other couples drove up while they were there, and they had seen this as well. So the police knew something happened, and the couple was truly frightened. So they followed them back down to the lake, and of course, by then the creature's gone. Well, this ends up in the Fort Worth Star Telegram newspaper the very next day, and that was an instant viral monster story because
Can
back then
imagine.
everybody read the paper, and that's the source.
Yeah.
So by the following day, there was as many as 40 or 50 people out there at this area of Greer Island at Lake Worth wanting to see the creature for themselves. And while they were there, the people were stunned because something bipedal ran up on this ridge that overlooked that and allegedly threw a tire and a rim over the heads of the gawking onlookers, to which they then dispersed in all directions. And this
Smart.
included park rangers and even police officers. Everybody saw this. So that gets in the newspaper the next day, and that sort of was ignited the flame of this Lake Worth monster story that progressed on throughout the summer and on into the next year of people seeing this what they kind of termed a goat man, but a lot of the descriptions described it as just an upright ape looking thing, but all of them said it had white or light colored hair. So that's the story, and it's one of those that since I live close by, I've been, you know, familiar with that. I've met a lot of people over the years that had some involvement or were there, even there the night that the tire was thrown, a few
Wow.
witnesses in all sorts of manners. So finally, I just thought, you know, I really need to preserve the history and write a book. I'd been speaking at the Lake Worth Library and done talks around town, and there's a Lake Worth Monster Bash that they have every 5 years. So it's just the right time to really put it all together in a book.
I'm glad they embrace it. I, I think it gets you nowhere if you fight it. So if they're having a festival every 5 years, good for them. You know,
Yeah, you know, back then this area was encompassed by what was known as the Greer Island Wildlife Refuge, and it was, you know, sanctioned off to where it wouldn't be developed. And today it's known as the Fort Worth Nature Center. So it's still preserved, even though, you know, Fort Worth Dallas is just sort of enveloped that.
can imagine.
But Lake Worth is a reservoir of the Trinity River system, and Trinity River runs from North Texas all the way down to the Gulf. And along the way, there are just numerous cases of localized Bigfoot tails and all that sort of stuff. So you know, it sort of makes sense. You know, something was there or passing through or along the river system because it's supported by a lot of other outside reports.
Yeah, I was surprised how many other Bigfoot type reports are in that area. Um, a lot of novices don't think they all think Bigfoot's in Washington State, Oregon, but there's a ton in Texas, especially East Texas, Arkansas kind of area. So it's just fascinating that there's this whole. It's almost like a ley line. It's a ley line of Bigfoot. I don't know if you're into ley lines. I don't know if it is, but we can say it is because there's enough evidence.
It could very well be, but yeah, I mean, you know, just there's so many of those. You know, I kind of started with the Legend of Boggy Creek, which was, you know, very famous because of the movie back in the 70s, but a long history of sightings of some upright ape-like creature in that area of southwest Arkansas. That's only 3 hours from where I live, and then everything in Texas, you know, and I have my Texas Bigfoot book, which encompasses, you know, way more stuff.
Yeah.
And it's just a surprising amount of it that, you know, you gather from what you can for 100 years of newspapers and passed down reports and then modern reports, you know, obviously, and people I know that have seen strange things. So yeah, it's a lot of stuff, and the Lake Worth monster just sort of sits right in there between something between like a goatman cryptid, urban legend, and Bigfoot.
I love Goatman. I wrote a silly book about a Goatman, the Denton, Texas Goatman. I wrote a very fun, violent novella, but I loved like diving into that world. I
Yeah.
think you went to Denton for the book.
Yeah, you know, because it's sort of, you know, you want to embrace the whole area, and oddly enough, Denton is only a few miles from Lake Worth, and there's a story of the old Alton Bridge, which is a Goatman story, and then it gets off into a tangent of the what are Goatmen and what are the reports. You know, the most famous is probably the Maryland Goatman, but you often have an association with bridges with
Yep.
these Goatman entities, and so I went to Old Alton Bridge just to, you know, just to be there, boots on the ground, and
Hmm.
incorporate that in the book. But interestingly enough, Lake Worth, the Lake Worth monster, There's no bridge there. There's no association with a bridge, and it's just like I said. It's most people reported it as being ape-like. Yet you had that first report where John Reichard, and he's probably the best witness, said that it was like a goat. And I never spoke to John. He passed away some years ago. However, I've spoken to his son, who was very familiar with the story his parents told, and that kind of filled in a lot of the gaps for me as far as what was in the newspaper and what John went on to tell his family.
Right. Yeah,
So
there you go.
So the research that you do for these, like when I first, think of you, the first thing I think is like you with a flashlight slogging through a swamp somewhere, fighting off snakes and spiders looking for creatures. But then, and I would imagine that like the pie of time you spend would be interviewing people, hitting
Research.
the books and the internet, and then actually going out. Like what's kind of the process of researching a topic like this?
If it's a story I've heard of, or something I'm interested in, then just sort of looking at what is publicly available, like what newspaper articles, what has been said, do I know any witnesses, sort of putting together to see if there's enough to one area to flesh out a book, because all my books are typically in a small area, so it's got to be a lot to it, even if we sort of discuss tangents. So just look at what's publicly available, try to decide if it's got any integrity to the case, and then start seeking out to interview people who are involved, and then not even concurrently or simultaneously or just however it works, to go to that area and take a look for myself so I can describe the environment. And of course I would want to see the thing, if there's continued reports or modern reports, then maybe I have a chance. But usually that's just hopeful.
Yeah.
In a way, it's like I'm really just documenting the story in a bigger picture and not just a narrow focus of, well, I went there and I researched and I did this, because it'd make a short book. And
Mhm.
Yeah.
I think some people want those kind of books. I mean, I do history and these fascinating cases, but it's not like, okay, I saw a Bigfoot yesterday and here's what happened.
I always think of you as more of a historian, because when you tackle on something like the Lizard Man or the Beast of Boggy Creek, like you said, you're gathering the full history and you're putting in articles and source material and interviews, and you're like Joe Friday, just the facts. Give me the facts as you see them. But then when you have visited a site and you describe the landscape and everything around it, that's where like the poetry comes in, because I absolutely love the way you describe some of these areas. And I know your voice very well. So when I get to those, it goes from whatever neutral voice is in my head and I'm reading to, oh, Lyle. We're now going through a bio. This is Lyle describing it to me. And those are like my favorite parts of the book, man. That's where your writing really, really shines.
Right. Yeah. Those really lend themselves to, descriptive prose and my writing abilities, because a lot of it's just the facts, and you kind of have to, I kind of try to sprinkle those in there without being too laborious with facts. You got to kind of break it up with exciting incidents and then inserting my own self. So, I love writing those parts of the books, and some of them, like Sinister Swamps, where I have a lot of environments where I can really describe every swamp. I love that
Yeah.
thing, and I think people recognize that and like that. So
As a city boy, I would never want to be in a swamp. But then I read that book and I was like, oh, I think I'd like to visit a swamp. I don't think Man Thing and Swamp Thing are out there, so I'm not afraid. But
Again, it's the snakes and spiders and gators that are worrying me.
to me,
Well-
even frogs. I don't want frogs jumping on me.
right.
And the mosquitoes and the I've seen Deliverance, so
That's my
Jeez.
favorite movie of all time, for real.
That movie is
You
fantastic.
know what I found out about Deliverance, and I was shocked. You know the banjo kid in that scene. It's him wearing a T-shirt and somebody else's
It's the other
arms.
guy's arm
Yeah,
doing this.
Oh, really?
yeah.
Yeah.
I was just listening to an interview with Tim Robbins, and he was saying that he saw that movie as a 12-year-old on a trip with a priest that they took the altar boys to see Deliverance. So he says, well, maybe he thought Deliverance has a religious connotation. He says, or he was a massive pervert. I'll never know. He's passed away. I can't
Right.
imagine how uncomfortable that would be.
Yeah. I think back then you didn't have the internet to really look it up first. You just sort of
Yeah.
knew maybe a little bit about it. And yeah, so, but yeah, I went out there once in Georgia to the site, the cliff where that was filmed and the gorge and all that stuff. And I love that because I love those. I love that well, it's an environment thing. They're canoeing down this river and then they encounter not monsters, but monstrous,
Monsters.
scary stuff. And
They're true monsters.
my dad is a bow hunter, and we were hunting since I was a kid. And I mean, he kind of looks like Burt Reynolds, or he did. He's very much that Burt Reynolds character, and so that's pretty cool to me in the movie. And just the bow action, and all that. I just
I'm so
love.
much more impressed with the bow hunters than with gun hunters because I'm like, if you're going through the woods and you can get your prey with a bow and arrow, you've earned it. When you're like, 2 football fields away with night vision and laser sights.
Yeah, not as hands on. Yeah, I'm kind of that way. I mean, my life got busy being a musician, so I couldn't. The hobby of hunting just I just couldn't keep up. But I still love the outdoors, obviously, and I love monsters. And this sort of my thing I do there combines the two. But yeah, I mean, I like to do canoe trips and stuff like that. And yeah, it's just I love that whole thing.
You're a nature guy.
This got me thinking. So when I hear it can be about ghosts or any other phenomenon, the most interesting witness that I like to hear from is usually cops. Like if you hear a ghost story, but then you hear it from a cop, you're like, oh,
It hits different.
yeah, he shouldn't be like the person in the house, whether it's a Bigfoot or a ghost or whatever. The person who called the cops can be anything. If you watch Cops, you know the amount of crazies out there. But the cops should be somewhat, normal,
Neutral.
professional. Yeah. So when you hear like a ghost, for instance, oh yeah, we went in there and this happened and you couldn't explain it or whatever, it's always more fascinating. For you, is there anything special about like law enforcement saying, or is there another type of witness that really registers with you?
Well, yeah, I think, police officers carry some credibility because, you figure they're pretty skeptical, they're jaded, they've heard all kinds of crazy
Yeah.
reports. So if they end up thinking, oh, yeah, man, that it's unexplainable, or if they go so far as to say we thought it might be a Bigfoot or whatever, that's going to carry a lot more weight. They would be observant and everything else. The other witnesses I really like are ones that are kind of starting from neutral. People that don't care about Bigfoot, don't even believe in Bigfoot or whatever cryptid. People that live in rural areas that will be familiar with, the sights and the sounds. I like that a lot rather than, if I get a witness who says, you might have a great Bigfoot encounter, but then, oh, by the way, I've seen 38 of them, and I also was abducted. And not to say that doesn't happen or whatever, but I tend to think rather than some old lady who doesn't know nothing about it says, I was sitting there in the road and it was some upright animal came out, and just our minds blown, rather than I saw a shadow in the woods, must be Bigfoot
Yeah.
type of a witness. But you just kind of have to use your gut feeling on some of that. And in all these cases, I feel like we'll especially if I can't interview the person. I'm sure there's a margin of error or wishful thinking, or if they say there's a monster at Lake Worth, well, people are looking for a monster. So, you just got to take it for what they say it is. But I figure even if a couple of those people were the most credible and they saw something, then that's enough to say something was there.
I always think if when you report a sighting of a cryptid, you have nothing to gain and everything to lose because none of these folks have become rich and famous. I mean, some have small levels of fame, but it doesn't really get you to some different kind of stratosphere. So, if you get somebody who's level-headed and is reporting that they've seen something, going on the record, um, that means a lot to me because I just think they're really putting their future in potential jeopardy. I think more so in the past than nowadays. It's kind of everybody has a story. Like you talk about, 38 Bigfoot sightings. I was just watching a thing, a woman who talks to Bigfoot every night for the last 5 years, but has no evidence. So that one, I wonder.
It's harder to believe. It's just not that it couldn't happen, but yeah, it's just yeah, people, especially, like those old cases where those people really had a lot to lose. People would think you're totally crazy. Nowadays, people have seen Finding Bigfoot. They realize that everybody all over the country has seen something like that or whatever. I mean, half the shows on television are about unexplained, strange encounters, monsters caught on camera.
Yeah, you
People
can't keep
love it.
up.
It's like,
We
so
used to
now,
be a little niche, and you'd find somebody else who was into In Search of and stuff. You'd be like, "Oh, you're like me." Now everybody's.
yeah, it's just, I mean, somebody's watching these shows, I hope. Uh, and, yeah, so it's so much more acceptable, but still, you're not going to get rich and famous. And
See, now this is great because you're on some of those shows, and there have been times where I'm watching TV with friends, and you have popped up, and I'm like, I know that guy.
Do you
I
say that when you
know,
saw me on that one?
I
Probably
did.
not.
I was watching it by myself, but I was talking to my invisible friend.
Oh, I know him. By the way, speaking of you being in these shows, are you planning to do anything future upcoming with Small Town Monsters?
uh, well, I've spoken to them about narrating something. I mean, that would be a Seth question there. I'm on standby for whatever they need. They kind of got away from doing narration in their documentaries, and I was basically the voice there for a while.
Yeah.
So that kind of made it intermittent, and they're all over the map. So it's unknown. I'll do whatever they need me to do. So I'm just sort of the guy on standby.
They've exploded, and I miss the narration. I mean, how many shows they're doing now is I can't even keep up anymore. But
Yeah.
I miss the narration.
Yeah, I tend to like documentaries that have narration, even if it's minimal, just to kind of segue the stuff. I mean, me and my girlfriend were watching one the other night on some other subject. I was like, man, I can't make sense of what is going on because they just start talking and people are talking. So I prefer that, not just because that employs me in some way, but I still done a few. I did their Chupacabra movie, and we had talked about another one. I don't know if it's in production or what. So,
All right, excellent. Um, Getting
What?
back to Lake Worth Monster, just real quick, Jack. I know how you gather information, so you're telling the history. Why don't you talk about the woman who I love the fact that within no time at all she self-published and printed her own book and was selling it, and that really kind of kept the monster alive.
right. I know you and I are just going, how did this woman do that? I mean,
No.
like if it was a month or something. But yeah, that in part, the book is a bit of a tribute to Sally Ann Clark. It was a woman who at the time had the wherewithal to go down there and start interviewing all these people that claimed to have seen the monster. She was using a cassette tape and recording interviews. She had read it in the newspaper like everybody else on July 10th, 1969, and she went down there to investigate. And luckily, she did, or a lot of this information would have been lost. But she ended up, let's see, that was July 10th. By October 1st, she had written and published and was doing a book signing with this self-published book.
Yeah.
And let me grab it here.
Oh, you have a copy? Oh, that's amazing.
I have 3 copies. It is extremely rare. So
Look at that.
there it is, and it's very self-published and so
You know
forth.
something? I almost thought it would be kind of like a thicker pamphlet. So I'm impressed it's actually a
Yeah,
bound book.
it's bound. So she had, she had it. I think she had typed it up, and then another woman, then they marked up editing, and then somebody typed a final version.
Yeah.
No, it's bound copies. So she, the best of my knowledge, she printed 1,000 of them and sold them in small stores around, cafes and stores around Lake Worth, and just
Right.
probably out of the back of her car up there at Lake Worth.
Hustling. I love
The
it.
book is highly collectible now because if only 1,000, I would say there's only about 400 to 500 actually in circulation. Some of these are lost copies. But anyway, so she did this and wrote this book. It's kind of half documentation, like cryptid research, but it's also about half her imagining what it would be like to see the monster and stuff. So there's a bit of she didn't have a lot of. She just wasn't a cryptid hunter, or probably hadn't even read any cryptid books. She just
Or a
wrote
writer.
or
Like,
even a writer.
yes, it blows me away.
So, luckily, I was able to use that as a source, and the newspapers and the television scripts, in addition to interviewing people. But it's a great accomplishment. And the guy who drew the illustration for the cover, his name is Bobby Brooks. He's still alive. Sally's passed on.
Mhm.
And Bobby Brooks is still alive and was helped contribute to the book, my book,
That's
which
great.
is sort of an update. But the irony with Sally's book is she actually claimed to have seen the monster 5 times in the years that, followed this case. So things were continuing to happen after the book had already come out, 1st of October. Even in November, some alleged photos were taken. There was sightings. Sally had sightings. So her book is sort of just encapsulates the first few months, whereas the story went on.
It's too bad she didn't write a second.
Yeah, I think she could have, and I'm not sure why. It's probably. I mean, I don't. I'm sure the book wasn't profitable.
It would be tough, especially back then. It wasn't cheap. Like now, you could do it. Just run it through Kindle Direct Publishing and get something, and not a lot.
Yeah, you can print on demand, but she probably had to pay for 1,000 copies, and if she sold 200 of them, she was only selling them for $2 because
Wow.
my buddy Craig Woolheater remembers buying a copy off of a spinning rack
Oh, the spinning rack.
in a convenience store, and he said it was $2. I'm like, wow, that's cool.
Yeah, but it was. I mean, that was when the comic book was, I think, 15 cents.
Yeah.
God, I miss those days. I buy comic books every now and then. Now, and I'm like, $5. $5.
Yeah, and they're on. I don't really even like. I love comic books. I love that old stuff and like printed on like paper. I don't
Yeah.
like comic books that every page is a glossy. It looks like the cover. It's like
They're all very slick. I mean,
I don't like it.
the design is incredible in some of them. I like, but
Yeah,
it's missing something.
yeah, just that sort of pulp paper. I collect horror comics and all that stuff. And even with my books, you notice the subjects are from like the 1960s and 70s. I just
Yep.
that era of just monsters running amok and organized police searches and things just got crazy back then. It wasn't just like a guy saw a sighting and reported it on the Bigfoot Facebook page. This was like they involved the major newspaper was printing these stories, police officers were involved. So it was just like such a bigger deal. So I love those old kind of just monsters gone wild, the
Yeah,
era of that.
I agree. Nowadays, I think if you put a Bigfoot on the nightly news, that people are just like, it's probably fake. AI created. Like, we're at the point now where unless you have a body and everybody gets to see it and touch it and poke it, I don't think anyone's going to believe anything anymore.
Well, you've got the Navy admitting that there's these phenomenon flying around, and people are just like, yeah, whatever.
Recovered bodies and materials, and nobody cares.
It's just so commonplace. And I think people are at the point like, okay, look, when we get a body, we'll pay attention. But it was already suspect with CGI. Now with AI,
Yeah, forget it.
forget it. I mean, people can't even discern what's real and not. I mean, I see Facebook groups arguing about the reality of a picture that's obviously AI. It had an AI watermark on it. I'm like, oh my god,
Oh my God.
the lines are such blurred to where we don't know what's going on. So unless somebody comes up with some better evidence, it's just going to kind of exist as it is with a big debate.
I think, and I was talking to somebody who studies AI, we're 2 to 5 years away from AI being indistinguishable from reality. And you've already got the mistrust of the media and what's out there. And he's like, I don't know what this world is going to be like in 5 years. People are just going to be their own echo chambers and believe their own thing.
A content creator, people are just going to have faceless YouTube channels that are generated by AI, and putting
You
it out
see,
there.
you see some of these Instagram models who are making tons of bank. They're AI. They're not even real people.
Gotta be AI.
Which, we got to create our AI OnlyFans account, Jack.
Yes.
Just to make us look buff.
So I have a very important question circling back to the Lake Worth festival. What goes on at a Lake Worth Monster Festival? Like, what are the activities? What's the food? What's the swag?
Yeah. Like it's kind of a family fun event, and it's something that was, the nature center put on, and they embrace the monster to the point where just so far as it brings kids, like people love the monster. They want kids in nature. So yeah, it's just this like sort of mix between an outdoor event. They have a guy dressed up in a goatman costume. They have a tire throwing contest. The monster do the tire. So you throw the tire and win a free oil change and
That's awesome.
whatever. And there's some vendors. Texas Parks and Wildlife will come out and set up and show stuff. Um, there's there's a hike, you go on a hike at Greer Island, and just a lot of fun outdoor stuff, as well as they have an interpretive center building there. So like me and other guys will do presentations like we would at a Bigfoot conference or something. So I usually do the history of the Lake Worth monster to sort of remind people of it, or to tell younger people what the heck that we're doing out here with a goat man running around. So it's pretty cool, in the city. It's pretty much behind it. So yeah, that's great, and it preserves history, even if people don't believe it or whatever. It's still fun, and it's still a part of this of the many faceted tales from Fort Worth.
Is anyone serving curried goatman sandwiches or stew?
Well, hopefully they'll have some good food vendors, and they should. So, cabrito or something.
The Bigfoot burger.
They need a signature. Like the Gilroy Garlic Festivals has the garlic ice cream. The Lake Worth Monster needs something. The curried goat
Yeah.
would be good.
Yeah, I really do. You attract people with the food. The food leads. So need a good dish, and we need
It's
this.
hot out there. Maybe like a good, like a slushy kind of thing or something.
A goat flavored slushy.
No.
Like the swamp water or something. I don't know.
Yeah. So, yeah, but it's cool, and they're doing one this year on October 26th. So they only do it like every 5 years. We've been trying to get them to do it every 2 years because like people forget.
Yeah,
5 years
exactly.
didn't cut it, but this year will be good because the book is out. That's another thing that prompted me to do it. It just sort of came together because I met Eric, the son of the original witness, got a hold of some archives, photos and other archive materials from the Star Telegram and the Nature Center, and they're going to have a bash. So I was like, okay, if I'm going to write a book, let's get it done because this is the time to do it. So,
Does Ghoultown ever play? Maybe not even at that festival, but other festivals. Have you guys played at other like cryptid fests?
no, we've never really done that because people ask, but then when I tell them you're going to have to, my band members, it costs a lot of money, to travel, and you're going to have this level of stage. You need a sound system, you need lighting. As soon as I tell them what the bill will be, they're out. So,
Yeah.
and it's real hard on me because it's like these things. I travel, I got to speak and sign books, and then to bring the band, I'd have to just do only that because set up sound check or whatever. So unfortunately, it never works to where both are simultaneous, but that's okay.
I think they should look. There's so many of these conferences now. I think back to 20 years ago, it was hard to find anything. But some smart promoter should just get Ghoultown just to play, because when you talk about doing speaking and then signing books, it does take a lot out of you.
Yeah,
Because you're on for that entire time, and it's like if you do a convention, you're on all day long, and it wears you down. So it would be hard to play if you had to do that all day.
yeah. I mean, I'd love to play at the Mothman Festival because they have bands that play down there on the riverbank. That would be really cool. But
Yeah,
it's just so Texas. It's a 20-hour drive, and just we'd have to be on tour or something to make that work. And
right.
it's just a lot of economics. The band these days touring just loses money. We do fine recording music and selling it or streaming and all that.
Hmm.
All that works, but you try to go on tour these days, the cost is so high, and a band, unless you're really, above a certain point, it's a losing battle. And all the guys, most of the guys have jobs, to live and families. So it's like, okay, hey man, I can do it, but you want to go driving around for a month and just like play some stuff. And, they're like, well, how much can we make? I'm like, well, not very much, but it'll be fun.
We can get drunk every night on what we make and then move on to the next place.
Which was good when we were in our 20s, but this band's 25 years in going. So
Actually, that you just reminded me of another thing. So when you were talking about before, it got me thinking. Hunter and I both, when we were younger men, part of our investigations involved us trespassing and sneaking into places.
Yeah.
Like the Danvers State Insane Asylum in Massachusetts. I snuck up there before they knocked it down. And when I did that, I remember I was a little bit on the older side, and me and my friend were both like, if we get caught, the cops aren't going to slap us on the wrist and be like, "You crazy college kids, get out of here!" Like, you're gonna be like, "What are you two old bastards doing here? You're under arrest." So, like,
you're arrested for stupidity.
do you find yourself like climbing over a fence when you shouldn't be, or do you kind of like, or how do you get permission to go places?
oh well, I'll climb over a fence.
All right.
Yeah, I don't. I do what I need to do. I still operate fairly the same as I did back in those times. I still do. So and I'll just ask forgiveness later, or try to. Oh, well, maybe you've seen me on Strange Evidence.
Perhaps you've heard it.
I'm trying to talk my way out of it. I just really need to get over here so I can look for my book.
You got to bring somebody with the goat mask who's like, 100 yards to your side. So if they start yelling at you, they kind of stand up and holler, and then, what was that? Oh my God. And then you take off the other way.
There you go. Distraction.
That'll work. It's a goat man. Let's shoot it.
Yeah, that's the thing.
Make sure whoever plays the goat man is someone you don't particularly care about.
Right. Or we get a Kevlar goat man outfit with Kevlar. So it's like, When you shoot the Bigfoot, there's a lot of stories of, well, I shot it point blank and it just didn't seem phased. Well,
Yeah.
we got to have a Kevlar Goatman outfit.
Let me tell you, I have a Bigfoot costume, and within 5 minutes, I've sweat out half my body weight. I don't. It could be winter. That thing is so damn hot. So,
Yeah.
like when they talk about people out there in suits scaring people and stuff, and it's summertime, I'm like, you'd be out of your mind. Especially if it's like in the middle of nowhere. It's like if you have a sighting and you're just hiking on this trail, and maybe you've gone off trail, just this random thing. I'm like, isn't that guy in a suit? Is he waiting around for weeks for you to stumble upon him, sweating to death?
Yeah, those things don't add up. It's like I've heard some of those. Well, my cousin used to go down there and scare people, and it was, I, I got hunters that report seeing these from a deer stand. I got, it's out there way off the beaten path. It's
Right.
hot. You can't even tolerate it wearing the proper clothing, much less some kind of a suit. I mean, people would just do that for 5 minutes and realize this sucks, and I'm not going to tromp around out here, probably going to get shot.
There is
Because
that too.
if my dad and my uncles see one of these, there will be proof because they're not going to mess around if they think it's something like a goat man or it's coming at them. So yeah, that just doesn't add up. And even in Lake Worth, there was a lot of theories. Like the police believed it was high schoolers.
Always high
Some
schoolers.
some people claimed that they did this. One woman said it was her brothers who were swinging on bungee cords, wearing white underwear and eyeliner, and that was what people were seeing. All this stuff that's just like that's even harder to imagine than that. Just there's a monster in the woods. It's just
Yeah.
preposterous.
And that you would misinterpret a kid in his underpants for
Yeah,
a white creature. That's
it doesn't
a
make any
stretch.
sense, And then the wildlife area is like, oh well, there's a bobcat loose in the park, and it's been jumping on people's cars. I'm like, if a bobcat jumps on the car, people pretty much can tell what that is, and it's not white. Even if it scares them, it's not big. It doesn't run on two legs, and it's not white.
Exactly. And there aren't many white Bigfoots or any kind of white cryptid. There's not a lot. It's just like there's not a lot of redheaded people on Earth. There's not a lot of white-haired cryptids.
But they're definitely more rare, and for the book, I tried to get some examples to say that there have been sightings, and I was able to get. I already had some in my files, and I just talked to a few people. Some that I knew had encounters where they said the creature they saw was light colored. So, that way I could just say, this isn't so far fetched. You
Yeah.
literally have some history of that. And one of the best ones I got, it was secondhand because I was at one of those Lake Worth monster bashes about like 10 years ago. And a woman came up and said, oh, I just really want to tell you, my father was a hunter and they lived like 30 miles from Lake Worth up in the Texas countryside.
Hmm.
And she said her father was a hunter. And in 1954, around that year, he came home from hunting one evening and was just very shaken up. And he said he had seen this big white ape, is what he described it as, while he was, hunting. And it just freaked him out. He was like, I don't know what it was, but it was, it scared me.
Yeah.
Well, at the time in 1954, this was, 15 years before Lake Worth, they just, you know, didn't know what to think of it. And she
Yeah.
said she remembered it. And she said my father didn't, he wasn't just making stuff up or any of that kind of stuff. She said it stuck with her until later on when the Lake Worth monster sightings came out and it was described as being white. Then it was sort of like the dots connected.
Yeah.
But a very credible woman, and she was just like, I don't know, that's what my father said he saw, and always just thought it was interesting and wanted to pass it on to me. So those are those sort of corroborations that, again, a neutral witness. This guy wasn't out hunting for Bigfoot. He wasn't a part of the frenzy of Lake Worth.
Right.
He just saw something weird in the woods, which happened to be like within 30 miles of where all this would go on later.
Hmm. I mean, and it's hard to rattle a hunter. Like they know what's out there. It's hard for them to be surprised. You know.
Yeah, yeah. And I can compare that. My dad and my uncles live. In fact, my uncle lives in the same town where that guy lives, northwest of Fort Worth. But I know them, and they wouldn't be rattled by anything. I think the only time my dad got rattled was when he came up once on a some kind of a goat skull or a bloody skull nailed to a tree in the woods, and he was like, "What the hell?" And there was ended up he felt like someone was chasing him, and he literally ran from the woods. It's the
See,
only time I've ever heard my father scared.
that's the scariest thing out in nature. People.
Yeah, I'm like, yeah, well, I don't know. It sounded like devil worshippers, but he never saw them, but he saw some weird stuff, and that story always stuck with me. Like, ooh,
I have a friend who he hikes, so he's done the Appalachian Trail and stuff. And I'm always like, "Hey, you ever come across bears and this stuff scary?" He goes, I've come across 4 people who scared the daylights out of me," and he's a cop. And
oh
he's like,
man,
and I was
yeah,
ready to take action if I had to. And he goes, nature's never scared me. Sometimes I'm slightly alarmed, but never scared. He said, there are people I run into on that trail. I'm like, they're out here because they got nothing to lose.
yeah, yeah. That's the biggest concern, and that's what I'm. I mean, obviously, I carry sidearms and stuff. There's feral hogs. I've
Yeah, you don't
almost
want to mess with
stepped on
those.
alligators. I've seen cottonmouths and all sorts of other stuff, but it's really like I don't want to run into people out here in the middle of nowhere where nobody's looking who have nothing to lose. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's the scariest part about all of this. Some of the research and some of the areas where we've researched in some of the mountain areas north of us, there's beginning to be some like drug areas and
Yeah.
growing areas, and man, that's you really got to worry about that.
You step into the wrong farm and you're in trouble.
Right, because some of the places we go are not state parks. These are not safe places. They're pretty much off the grid.
You be
Yeah.
careful out there.
Yeah, really. We can't lose you.
Well, I don't know. If you can write the book on it though, if I disappear.
I have permission. All right.
Sure.
The death of Lyle Blackburn.
The missing.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, at least the story would be told. But yeah, I didn't. I have to risk it for the benefit of describing these places for the reader. I'm really
Mm.
trying to go the extra mile to put in real experiences so that I can combat AI
It
because these are
it
real things.
shows though. It shows in the writing, man, that you've been there. Before we let you go, I have a question. What is your dream cryptid? If somebody said, "Hey, Lyle, here's enough money, you can live comfortably for a year, just deep dive into this particular cryptid, and produce a book," what would it be?
I think I'd go to Sumatra and research the orang pendek.
Nice.
I think that there's a lot of credibility to those reports, and it's certainly an area in some of those rainforests where something undocumented could survive. And I mean, of course, there's places like that with Bigfoot and everything else, but I guess this would be sort of a project that's a little more unattainable. So that's why I say Sumatra would be. Obviously you can't just drive there or just simply fly there for the weekend. This is
No.
this is something you have to organize and work with, and you need a lot of funds and all that stuff. So yeah, I think orang pending just because I think it's sort of like that old. Again, I'm attracted to this like sort of Indiana Jones stuff, this like old school, like research the Amazon. What is it out there that we haven't really explored enough? And I think that cryptid would be the one I would want to go after.
The Orang Pendek fascinate me. And I suspect where they are supposed to be, you could find just about anything. That's primordial kind of forest area out there.
Yeah, still primitive in some ways, and still enough of the rainforest. I know we're losing rainforest a lot, so
Mhm.
the habitats are endangered. So the sooner the better if we can get out there and truly put enough time. And some TV shows have gone over there, and few of my acquaintances have spent some time, but it's just a speck,
Yeah,
as
that's a
opposed
deep
to
dive you
like how
need.
many times have I been to Boggy Creek and tromped through the woods? You know, if I put that much time into that over there, that'd be
Yeah.
awesome.
Well, if I win Powerball, guess where you're going?
Mhm.
Sweet.
Welcome to Sumatra.
Quick footnote on the word orangutan. Um, the first time I ever heard that word was a good, I don't know, 12, 15, 10, 12, 10 years ago when Hunter and I first started doing this show. And he mentioned that in a cryptid show we were doing. And I looked at him, I said, "What did you just say?" And that was when I knew that he had jumped into the deep end of the pool with the cryptid stuff.
It's not something people talk about a lot, for
No.
sure.
Yeah, it doesn't come up much. Yeah.
I
So,
mean, the Yowie beats that. There's
yeah,
more Yowie talk.
yeah, more people would know the Yowie than orang pendek. So,
All right, well, this has been absolutely fantastic. I tell everybody you have to buy, and we're at spooky season. We're right here. Buy the Lake Worth Monster. I like all of your books. It's a fantastic read. It's a you're holding a bit of history. If you love cryptids, you're holding a bit of history about that cryptid in your hand when you have that book. Um, what are you up to for the month of October, and where can people find you?
well, coming up, I've got a lot of appearances doing Minnesota Bigfoot Conference, Texas Bigfoot Conference, the Lake Worth Monster Bash, conference in Louisiana. So a lot of just getting around doing stuff. One expedition to Fouke in there for good measure. And yeah, just kind of getting out and meeting some people and promoting, and just after, spending time writing a book. I'm sure you're the same way. You're like, okay, I'm done with that. Let me just refresh by traveling.
Exactly. I'm not
Traveling.
the type. I'm not the type who writes the end and goes, "Okay, let's start the next book." I'm like, well,
So it's like hard to say, like, what's next? Like, man. So, but it's I'm out there. I got all that going on. Gosh, what else? Every once when I can, I work on episodes of my Monstro Bizarro podcast,
it's a great podcast.
which kind of was inspired by Small Town Monsters because I was doing the voice for that. People liked it, and people were always like, "You should do a podcast." I thought, well, how about me and my voice and the narration, sort of an audio adventure or discussion of a case where it was something different. Each one's so that was kind of like offering small town monsters type content that was
Yep.
something different. So, but I have to kind of juggle that between everything else. So I'm not very regular at it, but
Well,
yeah,
they're like
people.
little presents when they pop up because I get
Mm,
the notice and I'm like, "Oh yes."
yeah, yeah. People say, so yeah, that. So if anybody wants to see where I'm going to be, check out lyleblackburn.com, and that's got links to all the appearances and links to where you can get the Lake Worth Monster book autographed from me, or of course it's on Amazon, with all my other books, and you know, it's easily accessible.
Keep hunting, man. Just keep hunting and gathering information.
Appreciate it. Thank you,
But be
guys.
careful.
I will.
Don't step on
For,
any alligators.
He never
this
says this to
for
me.
Jack. Wait, but he said don't.
You want to take us out, Jack?
Lyle, thank you so much. And everybody, buy his stuff. And we'll see you next time on Monster
Monster
Men.
Man.